Meeting of the Saline City Planning Commission will commence. Please have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will clerk please call the roll?
Chairperson Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Young.
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Heft.
Here.
Mayor Marl.
Here.
Councilmember Gearboff.
Here.
Staff Rep Weberline. Here. Commissioner Beardsley.
Here.
Commissioner Fosdick.
Here.
And Commissioner Troika.
Here.
Staff present, Colleen O'Toole and Mike Arbach. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as distributed?
Move to approve as distributed, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Is it, I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 23rd as amended or submitted?
As submitted, so moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments. Person is requested but not required to state their name and address. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and this citizen comment period will be limited to a total of 45 minutes. We have we have 2 items on the agenda. We will have a separate comment period for those. The first presentation is City Zoning Ordinance Amendment Request.
Mr. Tinker, you can step up.
ahead.
Can we see this?
Should be on the screens to your right and left.
Oh, okay, can see.
And there's one in front of us.
Okay, you got it then, okay. And this is the clicker?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm an architect. I live in practice in Saline here. I'm here representing my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Emilio. And we were invited by the planning staff to make a little presentation on what we're going through with the city right now. And that might involve action by you to amend the ordinance at some point in time. So the property that we're talking about is 201 West Henry Street. The first view here you can see it's a view from the sidewalk. And the thing that we're really going to be talking about is that little building on the left in the corner there. That's the carriage house. Here's the site of that we're dealing with. You can see it's quite a large lot. It is zoned R2. You can see where the existing, the house that you saw was built in 1890s. It's in the historic district. You can see where it sits on the site, and then you can see how far back the carriage house sits. And you can also see the land drops off, dramatically to the south. I'm going to take you just a little tour on the site now then. So here's looking at the back door. So you can see, there's quite a view from the site. Here's looking from the back door to the carriage house. You can see how far back it sits. Here's the carriage house itself. So there's the carriage house itself. And this is the side of the carriage house with a door, person door to it. And then here's looking back at the house from the carriage house. This just gives you a sense of what's on the site. And then this is the view from the backyard. So the site enjoys an expansive view that probably other properties do not have. So the thing we're dealing with is that the homeowner desires to provide housing for parents where one of the spouses has early onset aggressive dementia. It is expected that the spouse will become progressively disabled, will end up having to use a walker and then in a wheelchair and then, other things that need taken care of. And so also it's this current situation of the spouse and his wife is that they will probably end up losing their house, so they won't have a place to live shortly. And so the clients want to move their parents to their site. And the first issue with the main residence on the site is it is not accessible. So if you moved them in here, at some point, you'd have to make this building accessible. And there are, constructing an interior apartment in this building would be really too disruptive because it is a historic building. And here you can see, this is just like the front entry. So you can see the detail of finish that's in this building, also how small the spaces are. So having to try to make this building accessible to someone in a wheelchair would just be impossible. So as I mentioned, our current zoning is R2, and R2 would allow us to attach a second residence to this building and do that. However, we are, again, in the historic district, and the time, effort, and expense to design and then attach this second housing unit is really prohibitive. So our goal then is to use the carriage house for this purpose, to house the father. The building shell already exists. It's easily adapted open space inside. It's accessible at grade level, so we don't have to be building ramps and other things like that. There are many fewer issues to deal with the Historic Commission because we're only really putting in a walk and some windows. And then it will provide a really great view for the parents who will be here most of the time. Currently, the zoning ordinance for accessory buildings like this, the carriage house is considered an accessory building. So the current zoning ordinance for these buildings is being interpreted as disallowing for them to be occupied. Whether we would agree with that or not, we don't know, but anyway, that's how it's being interpreted. So, so we've made an application for a zoning variance to the zoning board for what we call an ADU, which is an accessible dwelling unit. Because again, currently the current zoning doesn't allow for accessory buildings to be occupied. A variance, we're asking a variance to allow that to occur. Here's a plan that we have for how we would renovate that building. You can see to the south, we have some large windows we're going to open so that they can see that wonderful site while they're sitting in their living room, or if they're confined to bed, they can see it from their bed, and also from the dining area. The bathroom is made so it's completely accessible. There's a turning room for wheelchairs in all the spaces. There's a complete kitchen for them. And so this would really meet their needs in a small amount of space. So that's all the visuals I have. The concept of an ADU, you might be familiar with it. An accessible dwelling unit has caught on in lots of communities around the country for, they're called granny flats and other things, that people have relatives that they want to bring to their house, and the way to do it is they renovate a space above a garage or in some other manner using an accessory building. The cities in like Ann Arbor has gone through this process, and they now have rules on how to approach that, and and they approve those. Cities in Grand Rapids have also done that. Traverse City has an ordinance. Even a little city like, a little village like Beulah has an ADU ordinance. I just wanted, so we're here just to bring this to your attention. This is a case where an ADU, if it was already in the zoning, would make our role our process much easier. We have to go through this variance process, and we don't really know what's going to come from that. Again, we came today to present you with our particular case. We are hoping that you might consider that if you decide that you want to amend the ordinance to allow for ADUs in the city of Saline. Any questions?
So, quick question. Are you familiar with the accessory dwelling unit ordinance in Ann Arbor?
Yes, I am.
And is why you're proposing something that would be permissible in Ann Arbor?
Yes. What the fear of, like homeowners, when this occurs, is that some outside third party is going to come in and buy up properties and then use the accessory buildings to have more housing. But that simply hasn't been the case. They've only had, I think, between 6 or 8 approvals in the 3 or 4 years that they've had an ordinance.
And did you mention you've already applied for a variance in the city of Saline
Yes,
with the ZBA?
yes.
Is that a use variance, or what would that be?
It would be a use variance, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for coming and presenting and bringing this to our attention. And the time I've been on this commission, I don't recall anybody doing it like that. So thank you.
I have a question. As an alternative, would you consider subdividing the lot? Is that possible?
Yes, that's possible. There's also another issue with this building is it's currently, too close to the side setback. So that's another thing we'd have to get a variance for. But I took a look at the aerial photographs of that part of Saline, and there's a lot of accessory buildings that are really close to the lot lines, and actually some of the buildings themselves are encroaching on that. So this would, help, with that issue. This is our condition is not unusual. It happens all over that part of Saline. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Any comments or discussion?
I think we're revisiting this at the end as a discussion item, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on. The next public hearing is the application from Todd Treese of Nets LLC for a 1-year final site plan extension request for the O3 Sports Complex located at 1200 Woodlawn, parcel number 18-12-31-150-001. You all have the report from City Manager O'Toole. Is there any questions?
Would you care to say anything?
Happy to comment. The applicant in this case is asking for a 1-year extension. As you recall, Ordinance 828 was previously adopted, which would mean that this is their last option to extend for up to 1 year. The applicant is aware of that stipulation and is asking for the full 1 year simply because there's still so much uncertainty regarding projects and pricing in lieu of certain inflationary pressures.
Any other comments or questions? The applicant would like to speak?
Sure. Actually, we should vote on the motion. I'm sorry. We should vote on the motion first, Mr. Chair, to acknowledge receipt. And if there's nothing further for the city manager, I'll move to acknowledge receipt.
Second.
Correct. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Well, thanks again for considering our application. My name's Todd Tracy. This is Jonathan Kronberg. He runs O3 Sports. And I think the original site plan was approved with conditions in March of 2020, like literally weeks before gyms were kind of shut down because of COVID. And so we shelved those plans. We're still, I mean, as you can imagine, business is still affected somewhat. And so we're just waiting we're not going to start the project unless we can finish it. And unless the business conditions will fully support it. But since we did go through all the effort of getting a site plan, we would love to extend that site plan as long as possible, because we still really do need the addition, and we still really do want the addition. But again, someone had asked earlier, I think it was Katrina asked, is there any definitive construction time? And the answer to that is no. There's no definitive construction timeline because there isn't a start date at this point. But we just don't want it to expire unless it has to expire.
Question, given the impacts of COVID, would you plan the renovation or the addition any differently today than you would have 2 years ago?
I'd say no. The biggest difference is we've got some new partnerships that have come in as well, with some physical therapy being brought in upstairs from Trinity Health, which is great, fantastic. But at the same time, there's talk of even furthering the expansion outside of what we even had for the initial blueprint. But from that level of it, that would be the only change, would be something greater, not something less. So from that level, I think it just comes down as what Todd was saying before, is things have picked back up. It's been great. It's awesome. It's great to see it as packed as it is now. But at the same time, this kind of feels like it's the real first year of coming out of the chaos of what we came through. So yeah, that's the main reason why we want to add one more year on this, and hopefully within the next, by the end of this year, we'd know whether or not which path we take. So.
Any other questions?
I'll wait till we have discussion on the rest of it.
Okay. Thank you.
This time, any citizen may come forward and make their comments. The comment period is requested to be 3 minutes. Oh, sorry. Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Yeah, can we just have clarification on how we created this new, the way we did the new ordinance, or however, that you can only have one extension. And as I'm reading your memo, it says, any extension request granted before the approval of ordinance 828 are not inclusive of the one extension limit set forth by the ordinance. How many of these, well, I guess one of the questions is, how does that apply to this? And two, how many more do we have like this? Because it's clear that the direction of planning was not to extend more than the 12 months. And this one, of course, was extended back in April 21. So now we're already down to 2 years. It'll be 3-year, basically a 3 years approved vital site plan for this, where the construction hasn't happened.
Sure. So as you know, when we adopt any ordinances, we can't go backwards in time. Those approvals have been granted at that point, and the clock starts from June 7, 2021, when we adopted the ordinance. So any new site plan extensions that come after June 2021, or new site plans that are approved and subsequently need extensions, can only have that one extension per the ordinance. So this is their first site plan extension request since that ordinance was adopted. I don't know offhand how many exist in that regard, but I can't imagine there's that many at this point, simply because we're starting to get so far beyond that point.
Come April 14th, 2023, they will have to submit a full site plan review again.
Correct.
Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Any other questions or comment? Is there a motion to approve the extension?
Second.
All those in favor of approval? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. You have one more year. New business, there's none. The discussion item will continue on the zoning amendment request. Are there any comments or questions or thoughts?
So I'm curious, can you even do this through a use variance? Or does this actually require a zoning amendment? I mean, I don't know if anybody can answer that question, but I'm just curious.
In our assessment, the applicant could apply for a use variance to allow the two detached dwelling units on a single property. It would first come down to whether or not they meet the criteria for approval, which includes if the challenge or hardship is self-created, which may be difficult to demonstrate in this case. Another would have to be that there are exceptional circumstances of this subject property that necessitate a variance. So it'll come down to whether all of those criterion are found to be met by the board and the applicant provides evidence that they have been.
Now, I understand they are requesting that the city consider adopting a new ordinance that would allow ADUs as a right under certain circumstances. I don't know if that's been discussed by, by the council or any of the committees.
Not to my knowledge.
And not to my knowledge either.
Did your firm do the ADU for the city of Ann Arbor? I think you did, but I'm not sure.
If we were involved with that, I'm not sure. You may be thinking of the short-term rentals, which is.
No.
Okay.
It was part of the Unified Development Code, but it was
Okay.
the ADU a few years back.
Okay. I know they've been making subsequent changes as well that I don't believe we've been involved in. But I'm here tonight to answer any preliminary questions that I can and to get direction from you if this is something you're interested in pursuing. What questions do you have, and can we assist in any way?
I mean,
So, I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I think this is ultimately a council issue, isn't it? I mean, would we give an advisory opinion on this?
Yes, and actually, if we were to explore an ordinance of this nature following our new codified protocols, I would actually ask for the code review committee to chime in with an opinion subsequent to that planning and then city council. So I do, Dan, unless you have anything else for our planner, I did have one follow-up question. Has Carlisle Wortman or your office more specifically worked with any municipalities to adopt an ordinance similar to what the gentleman articulated moments ago, comparable to what's in the city of Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, et cetera?
I know I have a previous experience doing that, and I would expect so. Specifics don't come to mind.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, if we're looking at consensus, I'm not going to commit to voting in favor of an ordinance, but I would have no objection to beginning the process with code review, perhaps reviewing some comparable ordinances from adjacent municipalities, beginning a discussion, and then subsequently having a discussion here with my planning commission colleagues.
I would concur with that. That's kind of what we've discussed at times in terms of looking at other types of housing within the community. It's just depending on where and how we would handle that. My one concern with this one, though, is because it's in a historic district, there's other layers that could add to this to be a concern. And knowing that it's got to go before the historic district, depending on use and how the buildings are redesigned and such, that could be an issue that's another layer that doesn't necessarily fall underneath zoning. So this is a unique situation, but any other aspect, I don't have a problem considering what potentially a new consideration of how we would use ADUs in the city. Great.
Well, with that, I don't know if we need to table this, but obviously further discussion will go on.
Well, I guess unless there's what I would like, and perhaps what staff and our planner would benefit from, is unless there's objection from this group, I think let's begin by having the issue discussed at the code review level. As most of you are aware, Mr. Beardsley has been on that committee as the planning commission rep, evidently, since its inception, and so I'm sure he will keep us in the loop, and when there's something to report and for us to consider, I'm sure he'll work with staff to make sure it's placed on a planning commission agenda. Good with that?
I support it.
Good.
Makes sense to me.
Chair?
Yes.
Just considering the fact that I live in a historic home and the comparisons, this is far back on the lot, this is, I don't remember if it had a drive to it. There's so many considerations. We had a dirt floor. We have a second floor. You know, there's a lot of alternatives as you look around the city to see the differences, and I would make those considerations as you're looking at it, just because ours is close to the road, this one's obviously not. So just the differences, and ours was a carriage house converted to a garage, to a barn, then to a garage, because ours had sheep in.
And I'll say from historic district as a staff liaison, they're looking at the whole property, whether, regardless of how far back the building is.
Mr. Chair, if I could for them at least explain the purpose of the code review committee. It's a group of citizens that do primarily two things. Look at existing ordinances that maybe don't make any sense anymore and sort of try to bring some idea of what might be done. You know, spitting on the sidewalk would be an example of, you know, an old ordinance, not necessarily in Saline, but in places. And the second thing is if council, or in this case, the planning commission, has an idea that maybe we don't have an ordinance that we might consider having, that code review committee basically would do some of the legwork to understand the issue, maybe understand other communities' treatment of the issue, and then report back to whoever gave them that charge as to what they did and what they found.
And to piggyback on that, if I might, we could theoretically even get this added as a discussion item at the upcoming code review committee. It's now transitioned from a task force, which is theoretically finite, to a committee which is permanent later this month. So if that's the case, we can invite the petitioners, the applicants, because I think that these individuals sharing their perspective with the committee would be valuable. It's another layer of the process, but it results in I think the outcome is better ordinances, properly vetted and scrutinized by in this case, 3 layers before they're adopted.
Another quick comment on timing. The city's master plan is coming up to its 5-year date where it would need to be readopted or extended, so that could be a time to consider incorporating some goals and objectives on this issue.
Okay, with that, so the item will be brought up next committee meeting, and we'll go from there. Any other questions?
I just have another discussion item. As we're talking about site plans tonight, of course, the car wash. And if we can get an update at that, maybe at our next planning commission, that has dragged on forever. I don't know what the status is of that currently, in terms of our blight ordinance and a number of other aspects of that.
I asked our attorneys about that about a week and a half ago. I've been a little busy the past 2 weeks, but I'll circle back to it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman, at 7:27.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.